All right, team. I am here with Eric Hinman, and we are doing interview number 5 for the Boulder Athlete podcast. And Eric, I'm really excited to have this conversation. We don't know each other. We're just meeting for the first time. And so everybody gets to see that in action. But I'm excited to just have a conversation. We got some fun stuff to discuss. I want you to, just kind of take us wherever you want to take us. And you've got a really interesting background in history and set of experiences and all the things. So we'll touch on some of that. Probably won't get to it all, but I think this would be a good time.
Heck yeah. Thanks for having me, Josh. I appreciate it. And thanks for the care package you guys just sent out. I love the t-shirt, the wristbands. I wore both of those yesterday. I think the other thing was a sweat bag in there. So really cool stuff.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Personally, those sweatbands, and we've got some other things in the works that are super slick, and I'm stoked as anybody to have that stuff. So I'm glad you're digging it. To kick us off, I had been doing some lightning rounds. I'm actually not going to do the lightning round because I think you've just got so much history and I think interesting interests that I just want to get right into the good stuff and kind of unpack all of that. You had mentioned I had asked you to just share a little bit of, where we might go and what we might talk about. And one of the things that you said was really interesting, which is like at 28, kind of what life looked like for you and then where that has taken you. I want to get into that specifically. I actually want to start by going back just a little bit further because I think, for most, we see your presence on social media. You've got all these products that you're passionate about and that you help promote and influence people to go and adopt. And that's one of the ways that we know you. And I think that's one of the brands, if we think of the Eric Hinman brand, it's like, hey, you got a lot of stuff going on, man. And you're an entrepreneur, you're a creator, you're a community builder, you're an influencer, you're on social media. And so that's present day. And I want people to know like you, the human, like the person and more than what they see on social media. So I'm going to go deep right out of the gate. If you can take me back to like, how would you describe yourself at like 8 years old? And then how would you describe yourself at like 18 years old? And then take us through, hey, at 28, this is what life looked like. And here's present day.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we're all going to write so many chapters in life, and my identity for what I'm known for has massively changed over the years. At 8 years old, I wanted to be Michael Jordan. I wanted to be an NBA basketball player. I think at that age, I failed to realize that it was likely out of my cards because I was only going to be 5'9.5" and would never have the skills that Michael Jordan had. But I grew up playing basketball in my parents' backyard. I would have friends over almost every single night to play pickup basketball games. I had a ping pong table. I loved playing ping pong. And I grew up in a really small town, Pulaski, New York. Graduated with like 90 kids, a town of 1,500 people. And my favorite thing in the world to do was snowmobile and salmon fishing. I spent a lot of time on Lake Ontario, and I spent a lot of time on Tug Hill snowmobiling with my dad. And I grew up in a family of doers. My dad was the CEO of a small mutual insurance company, and my mom was a school teacher for 30 years. So I watched both of them lead, and I knew I always wanted to be a leader. So fast forward to 18 years old. I think it was the first time I ever saw my dad cry because I went off to college and he was losing his best buddy that he went fishing and snowmobiling with all the time. And I went to SUNY Geneseo, a small state school near Rochester, New York. And I would say a few of the things during that time period were weightlifting. I got really big into weightlifting, but very vanity based. Bench press pretty much every day, first semester, freshman year, because that's all I knew that weightlifting was bench pressing and how much you could bench press. And I met a
That's
guy
right.
in
Nothing else mattered at that point.
Right. That's right. What's your bench? And I met this guy, Ian, who showed me that there were other muscle groups to work, but I never deadlifted and I never squatted. I mainly just did upper body all throughout college. College started my party phase where I would host massive parties. I didn't party much in high school. My parents were really strict. So I really let loose in college and just wanted to be the life of the party. And another lesson from college was my first semester freshman year. My GPA, I think, was like 2.2, which for those unfamiliar, that's not very good. That's basically failing. And that was the first time I really felt like I had failed myself and also failed my parents who were paying for my college education. So from that point forward, I don't think I got anything lower than a 3.8. I had a couple foes. I, still partied a lot, but I also learned time management And, I started studying. I started going to the library, and I started focusing on getting good grades because I didn't want to disappoint myself again, and I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I studied business management. And right out of college, I would say most of my 20s were defined by chasing the public perception of success. So I started a property and casualty insurance agency the day after I graduated from college.
Wow.
And over a 7-year period, I built a really nice book of business and residual income. And I built an asset, and I still own it today. And ironically, now my father runs that for me, which most people have no clue that I still own an insurance agency. So that was 7 years, driving 50,000 miles a year, going door to door with a suit and tie on, selling insurance, mainly to campgrounds and marinas. And, that's where I developed my resilience for hearing no, where I learned how to sell, where I learned how to build relationships, and where I learned how to be a self-starter. I saw all these other successful entrepreneurs out there and wanted to know how they got there. And, I figured it out. It's just by putting yourself out there and specializing in something. I became known as the guy who does campground insurance in upstate New York. So during that time period, I was the guy with the fancy suits and nice cars and, building a business in my 20s. But I was also still partying really hard. And like I said, I was sitting a lot, and I had no education around healthy eating, no real education around exercise and its correlation to mental well-being and emotional well-being. And I was eating McDonald's for breakfast, Subway for lunch, and pasta for dinner. And in my late 20s, I found myself pretty out of shape. I was maybe hitting a gym 3 times a week, but again, just pretty vanity-based, just doing upper body stuff. And in my late 20s, I hired a personal trainer. And, that's when I started taking fitness seriously. And, that's the picture I often share, showing 15 plus year transformation. Hiring the personal trainer, that gave me the discipline, the accountability, the knowledge that I needed to get back into shape. And that's also when I started doing CrossFit before I knew what CrossFit was. He had me squatting and deadlifting, and we would do anaerobic intervals at the end of those workouts, like sprints on the rower, sprints around a track, thrusters, burpees, stuff that really got my heart rate up. And around that same time, a CrossFit gym called Salt City CrossFit opened in my neighborhood in Syracuse, New York. So I want to say this was like 2009, 2010. So I joined that CrossFit gym and, instantly became hooked on CrossFit. I thought the competing aspect was so cool. The workouts for time was so cool. And, I had to learn all of these movements. Some I was with my personal trainer, but kipping pull-ups I had never done, burpee box jump overs. And, in the infancy of CrossFit, I feel like we didn't have a lot of the stuff we have now. There was no handstand walking or ring muscle ups or any of that. It wasn't as complex as it is now, but it's still like massively tested my physical and mental capabilities. And then also during that same time period, I joined a local triathlon club and started doing triathlons every Wednesday night with maybe 50 to 100 people. And that really, really captivated my interest. So, I would say
Sorry, you would do like a full triathlon?
sprint distance triathlon every Wednesday night. Yeah, it was like
Oh,
600 to 800 meter swim. And I had no swimming background other than doggy paddling in Lake Ontario. I had no biking background. I did have a running background. I ran cross country and I ran track in high school. So
okay.
I was a decent runner for my small school. And so the running came back pretty naturally. But yeah, I hadn't been doing any long aerobic stuff prior to that. So that was my entrance into understanding aerobic capacity and not just like strength training and, HIIT style workouts that CrossFit has. So from, 30 to 34, my identity was Ironman athlete. I, again, went from this out of shape insurance salesman to towing the line at the Ironman World Championships in Kona, Hawaii after a 4-year period. And I had a coach and I had a plan, and I learned all about, fat oxidation, aerobic training, heart rate zones, threshold training, just all of these things I had zero knowledge about. And I would literally just go into my Training Peaks account every single day, see what the workout was, and make sure if that workout was red, I turned it green by doing it.
Mm.
Years and years of compounding consistencies. And, that allowed me to get really good at the sport of Ironman. And then 2014, last year competing in Ironman, I just really dedicated my life to it, and I was getting kind of burned out. I was training 25 plus hours a week. My body felt pretty banged up. Was not doing a lot of the recovery protocols I do now. I really was just pounding myself into the ground to a fault. And, I think there's a cautionary message there of, many of us want to prove to ourselves that we can go harder and further and faster, but, at what, long-term detriment is that? So, I kind of learned that towards the end of my Ironman years, is that I was taking it too far and I just didn't feel good anymore. And I was doing it more for ego than I was doing it for wellness and to feel good. So
That's a soundbite right there. I think that is a trap that so many fall into, you know, just trying to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, and like prove that you can do something because you just want to prove that you can, maybe out of stubbornness rather than like, is that the right thing for your ambitions and health and fitness? And yeah, that's a slippery slope.
it is. And, I think a lot of people, especially high performers, they're type A personalities, and, we take things to the extreme, and the extreme oftentimes is not healthy, even though you may be perceived as one of the fittest athletes on earth. It's like, but to what detriment down the road?
Yeah, that's 100% right. I have someone who's a close friend and is dealing with this exact thing. And it's been a real emotional roller coaster. And I don't know, I can't say that I know exactly what he's going through from experience. I've dealt with plenty of injuries and, knee reconstructions and long rehabs and feeling like you're never going to be back to the way that you were again. Come to find out, like, no, you can. In fact, I have surpassed that by many degrees. But the really kind of a mental drain and the emotional suck that can have on a person is very real. It's very hard. And it not only impacts them, it impacts the people around them. Because guess what? They want to tell you about it and they're looking for support. And that's a difficult season to overcome. How did you get through? Like you said, you were getting burnt out and the body's breaking down. Like, tell me like how you're kind of navigating that season. If someone that was listening to this could walk away with some tips on like, give me some healthy perspective. How might I get myself through a season like that? What would you say?
Yeah, so my identity had become this elite Ironman athlete in this small city of Syracuse, New York that I was living in. And, that comes with a burden of wanting to continue to be that elite Ironman athlete. But I just felt like I was going through the motions. And I think that's the telltale. If you no longer have passion and purpose for it, and you just don't feel good day in and day out, you're not looking forward to the workouts. I mean, I was signing up for races and then not going to the races, and I was dreading 85% of the workouts I was doing. And it wasn't overnight that I just like snapped my fingers and said, okay, not going to do this anymore over here. It was like a 2 to 3 year process of just slowly moving away from that as my identity and moving more towards, I just want to do something where I feel good day in and day out. And I don't need to compete in order to be that. And, that's what I finally settled in with, is like, I'm starting to recognize that I'm inspiring a lot of other people to live a life of wellness. And that's going to allow you to be the best version of yourself. It's going to allow you to be a better dad, a better business owner, a better friend, better husband. And
Mm-hmm.
that started to really take over as my passion, as I just want to live this life that I ultimately enjoy. I feel good. I can repeat it every day. I look forward to each day. And I know it's inspiring other people to, figure out what they want in their day. So, that was a tough time period, but ultimately it's more just like writing things out. These are all of the things that bring me joy. I'm completely in the moment. It's my perfect day. And then these are all of the things where I'm not present. I'm doing it for ego. I'm not doing it for the right reasons, and started to strip away all of those things and then really design my life around, what I was deeming the perfect day. And, that also brought about moving. I changed my environment. I moved from Syracuse, New York in 2017 to Denver, Colorado. And, here in Denver, it just begs you to be outside. Creation is a way of life. I'm looking out at the mountains right now. I just finished a mountain bike ride. It's really difficult not to want to be outside in Colorado, where in Syracuse, like, I was doing my 5-hour rides indoors on a trainer. In the winter, I was running on a treadmill.
Yeah.
A lot of it was indoor space. And, I also didn't have nearly as large of a friend group that was into wellness back there, where here, all of my friends are into wellness. So it just makes it easier to live that life that I had started to desire by moving into a different environment. Yeah, going back to the chapters thing, I would say 2017 to 2020 was very much just adventure and recalibrating and really figuring out like what I wanted that next chapter of my life to look like. And, ultimately that led to building this following on social media. And, I've been able to leverage my business background to help other early stage companies build their brands. Also in that time period of 2010 to 2017, I started a software company. We built that up to a team of about 20 people. I had 6 business partners. We were building mobile apps early in the app revolution when the iPhone came out. And then I also opened up a CrossFit gym with some business partners in Syracuse, New York called Urban Life Athletics. And then opened up some healthy, fast casual restaurants, Original Grain, which still exists in Syracuse, and a trendy Mexican restaurant called Exo Taco. So I had all of this expertise in building businesses and being around entrepreneurs, money and venture capital, now with this following on social media and brands reaching out, wanting to work with me. It's like, oh, hey, I have all of these other things that I can offer beyond just creating content for you. I can help you raise money. I invest in brands. I put on a lot of community events. I have this whole network that I've built over the years of influential people and people that are really good at building businesses. So, my resume has allowed me, again, to work with a lot of early stage wellness brands. And obviously that's my identity now in the wellness space, as a guy who works with a lot of brands. But, what people don't see is everything you say no to. And for everything to, I'm saying no to a lot. And it goes far beyond just the content or the whitelisted ads that are out there. I really enjoy business and I really enjoy helping entrepreneurs build businesses. So that's my ultimate passion.
Yeah, you just kind of took the words out of my mouth. I think, for someone that doesn't know you, you look at your social following and it's easy to make the snap judgment and say, oh, well, you just get paid to go talk about these brands. You got a following, they come to you with some money. You're like, yeah, sure, I'll talk about your, like, that's the easy assessment. What seems to be very clear is actually you just have not only skills and experiences, but you got a real passion for creating. Like, you feel
Exactly.
like a creator, and if that's helping create a business that didn't exist, and that business actually happens to also align with your areas of passion around health and wellness and building, building a business. That's what I'm hearing more of is you're just passionate. You want to go help create and build.
100%. Yeah. I'm an entrepreneur through and through, ADD for good and for bad. And I love the early stage businesses. I love creating stuff. And I'm the guy that reads Gear Patrol and Cool Hunting and all of the Huckberry, all of the different sources where you can see new cool stuff. I've always been a consumer for that. So, that's why I'm attracted to these early stage brands that have cool branding and are building a community and, products that I like.
That's really cool. I'm glad that we touched on that. Also, as I was preparing for our discussion, I was talking to Jason. I was like, hey, tell me about Eric. Like, who is this guy? What should I ask him about? What are his areas of interest? And he just had glowing reviews for you. And one of the things that he said, a handful of things, but one that really stood out to me was just you are really sincere and authentic about building community and bringing people together and just creating experiences. They're not big flashy things. It's just togetherness and really kind of sculpting an environment that people can feel comfortable in, be themselves, be authentic, and have a good time. Speak to, like, is that accurate? And two, like, where does that come from? Your spirit for bringing people together and creating kind of those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to 8-year-old Eric that we talked about. Growing up as an only child, I had to create my own excitement. I didn't have brothers and sisters. I grew up in a small town. So, I started bringing people together early and having friends over to play basketball and ping pong. And then, college, where I was throwing massive parties, bringing people together
Yeah,
with this memorable experience.
yeah, that's right.
Now, I mean, I like to leave people feeling better than when they came. We have people who come over almost every single night to do contrast therapy. If someone reaches out to me on social media and says they're passing through Denver, can they swing by Muscle Mountain? I'm like, yeah, 4:30, here's my address. So we have so many people that swing by our house, and God bless my girlfriend, Sarah, that she allows it. But I'm one of those guys who's energized from conversations with others. I love the sauna conversations that we have here every night. I love the people I get to meet. That's how I get most of my knowledge. I don't really tune into the news. So, I'm just meeting people and learning from others. And I also get a lot of joy from watching people who've come here, seeing them develop friendships and seeing them build businesses together.
Mm.
It's just like little micro things that add up over time. And, the Ironman years really taught me that it wasn't being exceptional any one day. It wasn't going out and just like running 20 miles. It was 4 5-mile runs each week. And then 4 months later, maybe 6-mile runs, and then build to a 10-mile run. And, that's really how I've mostly formed community, is just most nights there's people here, and you compound that 365 days times 10 years, that results in a massive network of people that you've met. So ultimately I enjoy it, but I've also seen how it compounds over time and the opportunities that it brings. I very much chased opportunity in my 20s, which I think you have to. You have to be hungry. You have to go out there and hear and know a lot. But now I look at the way I live my life as attracting opportunities. And I just put myself in scenarios where I know I'm going to have chance encounters with people, and I'm going to attract opportunities into my life and amazing people into my life.
That's really cool and well articulated. The theme that is jumping out to me, and that I think is actually a really good topic for other people to wrap their head around, is like these micro habits. And you basically said that.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm hearing you say is like, you're very intentional about the things, right? Like you're very intentional about the little habits and the little, micro moments and experiences that you introduce into your life, because you understand like, hey, either they're super sustainable and they accumulate to a healthy body, or they're going to build meaningful relationships, or they're going to create a series of experiences that I'll look back on several years from now and be really grateful for and proud of. You're like introducing these habits, even incrementally, knowing there's a much longer game afoot. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing the longer game more so than you're seeing like the immediate kind of satisfaction. As I think about like people that are kind of getting into their fitness journey, and you have quite a fitness journey of triathlons and Ironmans and CrossFit, and you're hyroxing, and I'm sure there is a list of other things. Mm-hmm. But for people that are getting into fitness, they're trying to transform their body, much like you did between 28 and present day. And I saw this picture just recently on social media. It's fantastic. Great, transformation. Is they have to start with these micro habits. It is the small little decisions. And then you have to be prepared to sign up for the 10-year game. Mm-hmm. This is not a 6-month game. This is not even a 1-year game necessarily. It's micro habits that we're going to do for 10 years. Like, can you just, in your way, reinforce how you do that? Or for somebody that's a little bit reluctant to get some of those habits in their life started, like, what do you say to them? How do you inspire that?
Yeah, I mean, exercise was top of the food chain for me. That ultimately led to a lot of other positive habits. And, that took at least a year, if not longer, to make that habitual. And I think the key is, focusing on one thing long enough that it becomes habit. And once it becomes habit, then move on to the next thing that you want to make habit. And, that was really that period of 2010 to 2014 for me, where, first year it was all about dialing in training and purposeful training. And then it was dialing in diet, then it was dialing in sleep, and then dialing in recovery protocols. And each of those I did for a long enough period of time that it became habit. A more recent example, just before COVID, I started doing yoga. And yoga was not easy for me, coming from triathlon world where you're just wound up and not flexible whatsoever. And obviously, CrossFit, you're sore and achy from a lot of the workouts. So yoga was very difficult for me. But I just put it in my calendar for 60 days at the same exact time to take a yoga class, and voila, it became habitual. Unfortunately, I don't practice anymore because when all the yoga studios shut down during COVID, I wasn't disciplined enough to do it on my own. But, that was an example of something where like I just had to put a calendar appointment in every single day to do it until it became habit and I didn't have to think about it anymore. And, I think oftentimes we rely too much on like discipline and motivation instead of habit. Just do it enough that, I go to the gym every day at 9:15. I have a crew I train with. It's on autopilot. That is factored into every single day. most days I get out in the mountains and I'm either trail running or mountain biking because I enjoy it. And, it's not something I have to think about anymore. I don't think about when I'm going to eat my meals. I don't think about when I'm going to go to sleep. Like many of these things are just on autopilot. And, we all get busy, families, careers. I get that we all have glass balls that we can't drop. But, I really look at those things as treating them like a job because I think the number one priority is feeling damn good so you can give back to others. And if you don't feel damn good, then you're not going to do a great job at giving back to others.
I've had so many conversations around habits over the years. And at one point I was a personal trainer for about 9 years. And so you're having all these conversations with like, man, how do we get this introduced into your life, given your set of experiences and your background and your history with failure and success and like all of the factors that make you, you kind of have to navigate, where do we start, and what are the just very small wins that we can start to build up over time that are ultimately going to transform you over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years and beyond. It's a real art, person to person. But yeah, I think you've clearly done that in a way that you've put so many things on autopilot. I love that word, that you just get up and it's non-negotiable. Like these are just the things that you do. The moment you find yourself like at the fork in the road where I could either do this or I could do that, that's the dangerous moment. Instead, it's like, no, I don't eat that. Instead, I go this way. At this time, I do go to bed. No, I don't stay up and binge watch, Netflix for 3 more hours. And it can take some work to get yourself into that level of autopilot. But boy, the benefits are certainly high.
Yeah, can't agree more. And removing friction. I think that's another key component to it. We were very intentional about where we bought our home in Colorado. I can mountain bike right from the house. I can trail run right from the house. We knew that we wanted enough space to be able to put in a gym and to be able to put in a sauna and be able to put in ice barrels and just design this environment of things that we really enjoy. So I think that's another key too, is how can you remove friction? If it's 60 minutes to get to the gym every single day and there's traffic and you hate it, then that's a lot of friction. That's not going to be sustainable. So figure out how to remove friction around things that you want to achieve and bring more of into your life.
That's 100% right. Because as you said earlier, motivation, it really does come in waves, and you can't rely on riding a wave of high motivation from day to day to day. And if that wave is low and that's where you're riding, but the friction is high, you're probably not going to do the thing that you know that you should do. I want to talk a little bit next about Boulder and like along your fitness journey, where does Boulder come in? How did you get introduced to that? What's your experience been like?
Yeah. So I met Jason last year, right around this time. He was in Colorado for one of the open workouts. And I knew of Jason because he was on the Ice Barrel Ambassador Squad with me. And I want to say a couple other companies. And, Wyatt from Ice Barrel had said nothing but positive things about working with Jason. So I was really excited to meet him. And also knew of his amazing achievements in the sport. So when he was out here, we got together, we had some workouts together, and we hit it off just on a personal level, of similar passions of, pushing ourselves and being the guys that are on their backs after workouts. And, I had been following HWPO for several years from the time that Matt had released it, and I liked it, and I had certainly gotten stronger from it, but it felt like I was lacking a little bit of like CrossFit specific fitness. So maybe some skill fitness and like Metcon fitness. And, after seeing his programming, I recognized that there was a lot of different skill in there, a lot of gymnastics and a lot of, Metcons in there as well, but also catered to me being in my 50s where, with WPO, great programming, I was just following the regular HWPO track, and oftentimes the workouts were just a little too difficult for me or the weight was a little too heavy for me. So it was nice to follow something that I knew was designed more towards, my age and my abilities. It was a major shift early on because I was used to doing strength training and then Metcons at the end. And, for those listening who don't follow Boulder Athlete, there's usually conditioning up front in the form oftentimes of gymnastics. And, that took a little mental switch to be like, okay, we're starting with conditioning now instead of, just easy warm up into strength training. And I've really enjoyed that now. Now I really look forward to starting with the conditioning and then doing some strength training and then doing some more conditioning at the end. It's been great. I mean, I feel like it's made me better at CrossFit as a sport, which CrossFit is a sport. It's not just a bunch of things that you have to be good at. It's ultimately like, how can you put them all together and be good at the sport of CrossFit? So I've really enjoyed the programming, but yeah, I'm a people person. I like following things and subscribing to people who I know. So, that was a big part of it, was just meeting Jason in person and understanding his methodology and knowing that I was doing the exact same training that he was doing that has gotten him to win the games, multiple times, more than any other age group athlete. And, since then we've really built on our friendship, and we've done Wadapalooza together now a couple times. And whenever he's in Colorado, we get together. So I've really enjoyed meeting him and being a part of the Boulder community. And now I have a whole crew
That's
at
awesome.
my gym that I work out at that follows that training as well too.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear you say that. I share a similar experience. I've really enjoyed it. The shock of we're doing conditioning up front and we're doing conditioning to bookend all of this strength. It definitely took a little getting used to, but man, it just pays off, and you kind of see the benefits so clearly
Mhm.
that, yeah, it's easy to get hooked on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the open workout that was just announced today. My bar muscle ups have gotten much, much better than they used to be from all the bar muscle ups that we do. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that retest. I'm very optimistic that I will beat my time from 3 years ago.
That's right. I just looked back. We watched the announcement together with the Boulder community. I just looked back at my own video and was like, okay, that was, it went fairly well then. But since all of the gymnastics that we've invested in, I'm kind of itching to go get this thing going. I want to test it out because I think it could go well given, man, we've just built up so much gymnastic skill in Boulder that I want to really put it to the test. This will be a good one for us.
hmm Yeah, I'm stoked for it. I'll tell you what, one thing that really disappointed me this year, Jason knows this. I thought that I was aging up to the 45 to 49 age group. My birthday's August 2nd. And when I went to register for the Open, it put me in the 40 to 44. And I'm like, this must be a mistake because the CrossFit Games, are now towards the end of August. I'll be 45 then. And then I went and looked at the CrossFit rule book and saw that it's your age based on July 15th. So I'm the old man in the 40 to 44 instead of the young man in the 40 to 45 to 49 this year. So that was a major slap in the face.
Man, that's a huge bummer, especially if you kind of had your hopes
I
set
did.
on
I did.
moving into that next category. Oh, that's a tough one. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. But next year will be all the sweeter. You'll be all the fitter. That's gonna be a good year. I'll keep my eye on you for sure. A question that I have for you around I was gonna ask you this, and we moved right past it, which is around values. And I'll do this in a little bit of a unique way, but like Boulder's values, when Jason shared those with me, they immediately resonated. And I find myself going like, well, gosh, which one do I resonates the most? And it's a difficult question even for me to answer. I want to get your perspective on that. So that would be kind of part one of this question. But then I want you to go part two, which is like, what are your own personal values? Do you have personal values or principles that you kind of live by and operate by? And then, like, what's the connective tissue between Boulder values and your own? I'd be curious to hear kind of you unpack that. So, the Boulder values, as a reminder, one is confident in your preparation.
Mhm.
Number two is relentless in your pursuit. And the third is humble in your execution.
Love that.
Of those three, yeah, of those three, which really jump out to you and resonate most?
I mean, relentless in my pursuit definitely jumps out as a key one. And
Hmm.
it goes back to kind of type A personality. I'm a big believer in defining my destiny and, doing everything I can to empower myself to define my destiny, from competing in sports like high rocks and CrossFit and mountain bike races to being an entrepreneur to investing in companies. Like, all of those, obviously, you have to be very relentless in your pursuit in order to succeed.
Right.
I think that also compounding consistencies. It's putting on
Yep.
blinders and, knowing what your purpose is and how you want to live your life. We have a big ass calendar that we use to kind of block out our entire year. And most nights we write in a gratitude jar, and we have friends write in a gratitude jar. And, it's a great way, obviously, to end the day. But more importantly, we read those at the end of the year. And it's a reminder
Mm,
of all of
love
those
that.
things that were most purposeful for us throughout the year. Amazing dinner with our friends Stu and Kate, incredible trip to Kauai with our friends Jack and Israel, and It's just like, these are the people that we want to be around. These are the things that we want to be doing. So we block those things out in our big ass calendar at the beginning of the year to make sure that, we are living our life in a way that's purposeful, instead of just getting busy and just constantly executing on things that might not be as purpose driven for us. So yeah, relentless in pursuit would be the one that I would pick out of all of them. I really do like the humble one. I think it's easy to let your ego lead the way, as opposed to, letting like your heart and soul lead the way. Was this really fulfilling for my soul? Was this a perfect day, for my soul? Did I give back? Did I build community? Did I accomplish all of my tiny wins that I have written out that I like to get through each day? And then also, one of my close friends, God rest his soul, was Dave Mira, the famous X Games athlete. And I learned a lot from him. He was, my first friend who was pretty famous. And I watched the way he treated everyone, whether it was Little John, a famous rapper, or it was a homeless person on the street. He would treat them with empathy, and he would treat them all the same. And, I've really taken that with me of, doesn't matter who it is, treat everyone the same and be kind to people. It's a really freaking simple thing to do. Like, be kind, and people remember you most based on how you make them feel. So, I try to make people feel good whenever I interact with them.
That gratefulness one that is such a powerful practice. Like, for anybody that's listening, man, if you could add one thing to your day, that could be one of the more powerful things you can do, is just take a moment to really evaluate what you're grateful for. I love the fact that you put it in a jar and read it at the end of the year. My wife and I did something really similar one year. We should probably go back to that. But man, that just has such a way of keeping you grounded, right? And it just gives you perspective on the things that really matter. It keeps you aligned to, what your priorities are, where you want to invest your time and energy. And it's, I can at least speak for myself in my really early days. I didn't have gratefulness. I looked at all the things I wanted and didn't have, and was just want. And man, it couldn't be more different nowadays. Now I still want some things, but I am so grounded in the things that I have and just how valuable they are to my life. And I cherish them so deeply. And that's a really cool practice. I appreciate you sharing that. I really appreciate you making time for this. Clearly, you have a lot of things that are competing for your attention at the moment. So the fact that you carved some time out to be part of this is really cool. And I am grateful that you did so. And I think our community will be really grateful as well.
Happy to, Josh. Yeah, good luck with the Open.